All right.
Here we go.
Welcome to the Blueprint Tour, episode 6, 7, 8. Who knows? It's one of the coolest ones we've done so far. If you can see Melissa's house, it's pretty awesome. Oh, thank you.
Please. Autographs at the end, folks.
So I'm here with Carter and Melissa Vaughan from Melissa Vaughan Architecture, and we're in lovely Train City, Ashland. Yeah. And so thanks for having us. This has been awesome. I mean, I wish I could just sit here and play piano for the rest of the day.
And play with Cooper.
Yeah. So, okay, again, we're here with Melissa Vaughan, and she's an architect we've worked with on many projects. And our whole thing, Melissa, has been coordination. This one word that I don't think you'd find anybody says is not important. But when things go wrong, you find that nobody really agrees on whose real responsibility it might have been to do coordination. I'm sure you're in the middle of all of those things as an architect. But before we get going, do you want to give us a little intro about you, how you came into architecture?
Oh, interesting. I loved drawing as a child, and I didn't realize that I would be an architect. But in college, I couldn't find my way, and I ended up in an architecture class my third year, and I loved it. So I started pursuing architecture. And if you had asked me that as a young person, I didn't know any architects. I hadn't been around architects. I didn't know any real builders or anything. But my mom loved nature and landscape, and she always gardened, and she was always making my clothes, and she would sew until the wee hours of the night. And so I learned about color and pattern and all these things from my mom. And we were always doing something, building little pathways in the garden or doing things like that. So I ended up going to architecture school and spent my life with my kids stopping to look at every building on every family road trip, and they'll tell you that
up at the ceiling.
I always look at the ceiling.
It's the most annoying thing for a family to grow up with an architect.
Yep.
You're like, I don't know, how do they connect that? Or I wonder how they built that? Or, ooh, that's a cool idea.
My son started driving because he didn't want me to stop.
Drive off. Yeah, my wife will do that with cows. Whenever she sees cows in the pasture, she always wants to stop or drive off the road. But yeah, so you went to, I didn't even know this about you. You had your master's in architecture. Is that required to get the license?
Well, for UVA, they only offer a 4-year program. And I went to a liberal arts college, university, and then I had to get my master's. So it's a 3-year program, and I waited 2 years in between, worked for a while, and then went to get my master's and I worked for professors, which really helped me develop the design aspect of architecture. I've always been on the designer side. I didn't grow up with anyone doing construction around me, so learning the detailing and the construction side has always been a challenge. It took me a lot longer. It wasn't part of my natural library, or what people say their natural talents. So you're talking about the actual like means and methods part of it, or what do you mean? Actually, detailing.
Just detailing the
understanding
way
how
connect
everything comes together, and understanding how to build it in the way that you would build it. So how things go together. And sometimes one of my colleagues would say, well, that's a great detail, but how are they going to get the screwdriver back there to connect that when they get to that part?
Yep. That's like us showing like one set of 900 KC mil, which is like a huge wire. So it's like, well, that could work, but I'm not pulling that. And it's like, okay, fine, we'll do 3 sets of something smaller.
Right.
We that's a common thing in the industry. No matter how much you may know from your experience as an architect or an engineer, there's always going to be that gap, because we might spend 30-year career or of our lives mastering the art of understanding the code and getting constructability figured out, sort of. But that's nothing compared to the person who spent that 30 years doing the building.
Exactly.
And so I think that's a part of the industry where there's a lot of head-to-head headbutting. We're like, oh, I did your design for you, this or that. But we prefer to just acknowledge that we're weak in the details of how things get put together, and we're blind. We have a blind spot because we're so focused on the code. And like there may be something that looks so obvious when you look at it, but it's so easily missed as a designer whose just mind is in a completely different plane of thought, you know? So that's why we like talking to the GCs and the trade contractors on the tour, because it's like, tell me why. Can you tell me all the stories about how much I made you mad when you looked at my drawings and it didn't make sense?
We might have one of those coming up.
I know, right? That's
There's always one
It's just
coming up.
it's just sort of a constant thing, because especially with the size jobs that you all focus on, and the size jobs that I focus on now as a sole proprietor, the QC QA process in larger jobs it's just required. It's not even a choice. It is absolutely, you have to do it.
Yeah.
And in the smaller jobs, don't have the budgets, they don't have the time. All of a sudden, they've asked us to do, somersaults to get these projects done, because they have a contractor that has a timeline that all of a sudden we're now being sucked into that vortex, and we have to continually push back against that, and it's hard because the expectations of getting these jobs done and skipping that part about the QC and QA.
So, because there's not that much budget, we were just chatting with Duke Dotson, a developer, and I really appreciated what he said about his contingencies. On small projects, he has a larger contingency. Just he's assuming a lot more is going to go wrong on a small project because there's not the budget or the time to articulate all of those details.
Yes.
And so he just expects it. And I had so much respect for that. I'm like, that's what I've been trying to tell folks.
Yes.
If you don't have the time or the money to pay for the higher fees on the design side, you have to expect things are going to go wrong.
Yes.
And,
That's a great, I'm glad that a contractor.
He's a developer. He was the one writing the checks, which is even better. He's used to it.
Well, he's being realistic. And that's the part. Everyone is trying so hard to push the budget in the scope of work and the budget and the schedule into this alignment, which is very difficult on these small jobs. So it's nice to have someone who realizes it's not easy.
Yeah.
You have to have a contingency.
Yeah, a larger one than normal. On the big multiple $40-50 million multiple building projects, it's like, okay, well, we have more. We need to plan it more. You need more.
There's more planning.
VDC, they call it, like the BIM modeling and all that. People don't understand how much time coordination takes, because it's one thing to have some general coordination and go design build and kind of work through it during construction, but it's another to just say, I don't want to have any mistakes. That to buy down a zero mistake, I wouldn't even call it mistake, just a clash of some sort. We don't know what's above the ceiling or behind the walls, especially adaptive reuse. And then people expect kind of this X-ray vision from us as the design professionals. It's difficult. Like, well, even if we did have the time and money, we'd need to demolish half these walls to be able to see it anyways. So we're having to make general educated guesses. And that's always a challenge for us, mechanically, especially when it's an existing system. They want to reuse it. And it's like, we've come across that. Like, to map out that as-built would be twice the fee of the MEP combined.
Right. Exactly. So that's a great question. What is the first thing you say when, and maybe this is something that I need to start saying, when I make that contract with the owner?
When it's adaptive reuse or something, and there's a bunch of unknowns, I always, we do our best to let them know that the unknowns can be painful. And we really aren't even geared up yet to know all the unknowns unless you want us to put a hammer in our hands and start taking your walls down. You don't have your permit yet,
So one of the things that the way that you structure the fee schedules, one of the things that is easy to do is just skip that. If the owner has a fee and they're saying, oh, we have to meet this fee. But what I'm hearing, what I think I'm going to do from now on is we have to have a meeting, all of us.
Yeah.
And I want to have a meeting. And this has been something I've realized too. But the first meeting, I wasn't demanding that. But the second meeting where we do the coordinate, we actually sit down and sit down with the owner and go through the drawing set. Have a hour to hour and a half, 2 hour, something a little bit longer than just a casual meeting where we're opening up the drawing set and looking at it with the owner and saying,
Yeah.
this is part of our process. You have to come to this meeting and go through this, because a lot of owners, they don't ever look at the drawings. They don't know what's in the drawings. They have they get the drawing, it just ping pongs off of them to all the other people.
And I don't speak for all designers, but I know at PermaZip on the MEP side, we appreciate a design assist, like trade contractor, and on a meeting like that too, when we're talking about feasibility and what makes sense, what's practical. I mean, we're just so disconnected about how physically difficult some of the stuff is that we specify. We don't know.
Right.
And I don't know how long this stuff takes, or that the fact that we could route the duct 5 feet over and that would save however many hours of labor, or what's on the shelves, lead time. So in that meeting, we've been advocating on, especially if it's design bid, at least pay a contractor to be on a meeting like that with us,
Right.
to give us a realistic anchor about what's practical and what's constructible. We're not completely terrible at knowing constructability, but we're nothing compared to the person whose entire life and career is about that, you know?
Exactly.
And we can be the code nerds, as I always tell people. Like, we know the code. We know the energy code inside and out. We know the building code, the ICC codes, the NFPA, and I know they know it too, but we have to know it in a very different way, like legally and ethically. You
I'm
know?
very grateful for that. One of the things I'm very grateful for y'all's drawings is that you do know the code.
Yeah, it's hard, you know.
And it's and I because I'm carrying the stamp on these drawings,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you do too. But knowing that, seeing the complete set outlined like you all do, it gives me confidence. This huge confidence that we're covering just at least that part.
Mm-hmm.
The you said something about that. Oh, when when we were talking, I recall when I was doing a lot of sustainability and the integrative design process, you sit down with everybody. You sit down with everybody all during the process to build and design and build a sustainable building.
Yeah.
You're sitting down with the contractor from the very schematic designs, and you're going all the way through.
That's so good.
And so, you know, I'm always trying. I have to educate so much as an architect for my clients, because my clients are not not always. Sometimes I'll have the bigger clients, but most of them are not the savvy, facility manager type clients. They're the small businesses that want to start something, and or they just need a lot more hand holding, and having these other meetings and having that construction meeting be a requirement for our coordination. So how do you do it when the budgets are so tight, and but we know that it's going to save them money in the long run,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because their option is that, or $50,000 for the VDC and like high detailed coordination drawings. And one of the big things that happens at a meeting like that is trust is built if it goes right. Sometimes they can go sideways, but usually that's our opportunity to kind of let everybody know what our limitations are, what our assumptions have been, and acknowledge their skill set in like show appreciation for their value, like the contractor and trade contractor, and try our best to get ahead of it before it becomes an RFI. Right. Sometimes we don't hear about it until it's RFI, aka change order. You know, that's usually the function of an RFI when we get one. It's like, oh, this can't work. Can this happen? And it's like, instead of that being our first encounter with the trades, we'd love it being at the design table and then a construction kickoff, and just 1-2 hours here and there. We used to be we really struggled trying to figure out what should we include in our fee proposal as a service, and we did realize that those meetings are one of the most important things. Like, they reduce risk more than anything. If anything, just a little bit of trust building a relationship that can be ongoing through the stress of a construction project, which peaks rapidly for any reason, and help to like let people know, like, we can think of this solution. We talked about this. We prepared for this. We need that booster pump. That's why we have the valves over here. We it's no problem. How about you? What have you learned in your experience that's been something you thought would be valuable to a client and turned out not being so valuable later on, like, versus something that you undervalued that now you realize is valuable to the client?
So a lot of clients this is going to go right back into y'all's purview. See, the clients look at me as the designer, and they go through all these iterations of all these different colors and all this stuff, and that's all fine, and we can do that. But they see the design as this big piece of it, the architectural interior design, which actually the MEP design is a huge part of it, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the undervalued things that now I'm realizing why I'm sitting here is to start focusing on that more. I think I need to start focusing on that more. That bringing that piece in, as rather than just assuming that y'all are going to take care of everything, which you do.
Yeah, but it can, some things just catch you off guard and MEPs, and you're like, wait, what? Oh, okay. This assembly use now has to have another
$100,000 later.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and y'all have caught a couple of code things on my end where I'm like, oh, thank you. Forgot
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
And so it's this team, and you go leaving a big firm where I was working on bigger projects and I had bigger teams, we'd have 20 people sitting at the VMFA in those meetings,
Yeah.
those design meetings. And
Wow.
and they were like, every person had a specialty, and they were experts at that specialty. And then you went through, and those were small projects, really, for that large of a team of people. And so it just makes me realize that when I transferred from that world to having these smaller, more, let's say, not as educated clients, not as,
Like less experienced.
they're not as experienced at construction. They don't know all the things. And I'm trying to handhold them through it. And they don't listen
Yeah.
to what I tell them. A lot of times, sometimes they just don't know how to listen to it. It's not that they're willful.
Yeah.
They don't know what they don't know. And so they don't know what aspect they have to. So what's undervalued is that time or getting the clients to understand the different things that are going to affect their project and where that money is coming from. Because the contractor will tell them that, and they always lean towards the contractor to tell them all that. But really, we need to gather that back
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah. And it ends up on the drawings. Like that important stuff ends up on the drawings. Sometimes it's just not, like you mentioned, they might look over it or not look at it when we need them to. We realize how important it is to have those conversations. Like, hey, look, this piece of the drawing in particular, don't ignore it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The difficulty, I think, what you're talking about is the risk the client themselves or the user themselves poses to all of us in the equation. And that's actually come up in almost every single conversation. The educating the client, managing expectations, how much they pose, like what they think is going to happen versus what really happens. And it makes sense. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars at the end of
Right.
it's not cheap. Even if they get the cheaper thing,
Right.
it's like
a lot of money.
It's still a lot of money. Even if you have to buy the not great HVAC, it's still frustrating. No matter how many times I tell you that's going to be a hot kitchen. And we go from that 12.5 ton I'm recommending, which gets you to 80, down to like the 7.5 that they have the budget for. They're still going to be mad because it's still a lot of money.
Oh, I know.
Well,
the negativity in this whole profession and the sort of the frustration, the level of frustration, it's so hard to manage because people are spending so much money, and it is a huge risk for them. And what I notice is the contractor becomes the owner's go-to
Yeah.
once it leaves us.
yeah.
And so even in another whole aspect of this is CA. I mean, CA is mandatory in bigger jobs, and CA is optional in our jobs.
Yep.
And so all of a sudden we've done this whole design, and we're talking about how do we keep this conversation and this education and this budget that we're managing, how do we keep reviewing that? Sometimes I don't even get the contractor estimate. It isn't given to me, even though I've requested it. I've told people I will review it for them as part of my process. No problem. I want them to be protected, and it's not that I'm saying anything negative about contractors. They're doing a great job at what they're doing. It's that it's that missing piece of continuing that conversation all the way through, which.
Well, the contractor ends up being there every day because that's their job at that point. Like they're now the advocate for and the partner. You know, we're there through the design, and then it takes over. They're there every single day.
Yeah.
And so we can't advocate for ourselves, or even just simply say this is what our assumptions were. I mean, I hear it all the time. Oh, the engineer should have done this.
I know.
And I'm like, well, the engineer should have technically only done what was in the contract for the engineer to do. So what I love about being at a kickoff meeting is I can say, just so you know, whatever your opinion is, the engineer, the budget didn't have for me to do all of the should haves that you think. But let me tell you what I did and how we're going to approach this.
Yeah.
And one recent meeting was the GC. First thing they said was, we assume the engineering drawings are coordinated and so are the architect drawings. and nobody would say they're not coordinated out loud, but I had to say, listen, we didn't put the air handler in the middle of outer space. Like, it's not that far off, but we didn't do what I would consider full proper coordination on every beam and all this. That takes time. So, and the developer was on the call at the time. This is actually Duke, the guy was telling me, one of the greatest developers, the most reasonable guys. So just can you put together in your head, Mr. Developer, that the GC just said he assumed our drawings are coordinated. We have coordination drawings delegated to him. He's not doing. So somebody hasn't done the coordination, the detailed coordination, which means you're going to have change orders if you're fine with that. But if you'd rather pay the $40,000 or however much it would be for somebody to go through every little piece of this building, then you can do that. And they're like, no way, because maybe it's $15,000 worth of change orders they can expect. Way lower than anything at 40 or lower is better, right? Because it's quicker. So for me, that's why I like the kickoff meeting. We set expectations with what was in our services, or in yours, how we approached things, how we might delegate some of the questions. What are the big question marks? Well, we don't know what's above that ceiling over there. By the way, we think it's this. So get over there really quick when you do demo and let us know. So that's those meetings. Like you said, the contractor takes over when they start building it, and they're there every day. And they may or may not be saying nice things about us. We don't know when things go wrong. Right. And so if we could just show up occasionally.
We kind of know.
Yeah, we know the situation. And, that's why I like to play on that, to try to build some trust. Like, look, I know I'm the guy that drew this thing that didn't make any sense, y'all. But I'd rather you let me know as soon as possible. Let's talk about what I assumed.
Right. The assumptions are very important. And there can be general notes on the front cover where scope of work, where we define that, where we define our assumptions.
We try all the time. We have a giant note on ours. It still gets ignored. What we've noticed is that the fabricator, for example, will get one sheet of our drawings, just the floor plan.
This happens a lot.
I keep it in my hand in front of your face. They'll fabricate directly off our drawings, and we're asking for shop drawings.
Yeah.
But we don't get them. Instead, they send that directly to the fabricator, and then it's like, well, you've heard it. I did it per the plan. I'm like, and my response is always, you mean the one picture on the 7 pages of my plans?
I know.
So I like to say that at the kickoff meeting as well. It's tough, But okay, so back to architecture on your side. Aside from the CA, I'm always curious because I'm a musician, and for me, I got into music because I just loved the art of it and all of that. And there's a different passion. Now, I went down the road of creating a recording studio, making it a business, and I ended up falling out of love with it a little bit because it became a job. When you fall in love with architecture, your practice is probably similar to why somebody might be a musician, for the love of the art. Can you walk me through how that's been, like the reasons you fell in love with it and what it became? And did it change?
That's a terrible question.
No, everything's fine. I love it all the time.
Well, I didn't realize. So I love nature, and I love being outside, and I love all the sustainability. And that was always, I gravitated, like right in graduate school, I took a class in sustainability by the person who wrote the first book on it.
Oh, cool. Wow. Wait, this is at Harvard, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
he and ecology it was, and I was fascinated by that. And I'm just fascinated by, I paint, and I love painting natural things, and I'm just fascinated by the complexities of all the patterns in a flower or trees and all of that. And I just, that all of that can come into the design. But what I didn't realize, and I love that part, and it continues today, like all of that, how you're going to move through a space or have light going through a space, that's been consistent throughout my practice. What I didn't expect was how much negativity there is in our practice. And that's been very difficult for me to want to, or be able to feel really good about projects when there's so much to manage in terms of, and I don't know if negativity is the right word. Maybe it's just conflict. It might not be negativity. It might just be conflicts, and it's not like argument conflicts. It's like you're saying, well, the duct is hitting the truss. We can't get it through. We don't have room or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a
Politics.
conflict. And then it becomes a conflict of the budget. And then it becomes a conflict that the owner or say it's a university, and the university architect now has to deal with that with the whole upper, the provost or the dean. Hey, we can't do the science building like this because we have to do X, Y, and Z. We're going to have to change. We're going to have, your view from, we have a budget issue. Your view is going to, of this building from the airplane's going to change. You're not going to be able to see the roof the way you thought you were going to see, whatever it is,
Right.
So you get these conflicts that become very complicated.
Yeah.
And so hard to manage. And actually, I've worked on very difficult projects. And I think because I try to listen to what is going on and what the problem is, and just sit there and absorb it all, and just figure, just really listen and absorb, and then go, okay, well, then how do we figure this out actively with the owner or the contractor or whatever? Still, the conflicts of the practice are become just tiring.
Yeah.
It's a lot of energy that goes into every project's a brand new set of circumstances, and no matter how many times you've done a building project, like young architects can't just open their shingle after a couple of years. You can't speed up experience.
Yeah.
In some professions you may be able to, but not in architecture. You have to have lived through seeing where you did something and you drew it and you're responsible and you didn't, you have to, the lessons learned thing is so important. So the amount of energy that has to go into resolving all of the conflicts in a project, no matter how well you've designed it, it's just like, there's always something that you don't know about. And I guess, I've forgotten what your question is, but
this is good.
Like how architecture affected me is that sometimes I just want to go and be a landscape architect.
We should get one on the. I'm gonna move this real quick. Let me just adjust.
Because I think sometimes I just want to go out and make the world more beautiful. I actually don't build new buildings anymore. I won't.
Oh, really?
I don't.
I don't. What's the motivation for that?
I think we have enough buildings we need to reuse and adapt, and we have to be more sustainable. If I would embark on a new construction, it would have to be really, really sustainable. I'm getting to the point where I'm very frustrated by my profession of building, because we're not all getting on the page of, and even these small jobs I'm frustrated with sometimes when there's not a dumpster outside recycling
Yeah.
and they're not listening
All
to
that metal that just goes into the landfills and
Yeah.
Oh
so,
man, the sheets on Route 10 would really frustrate you. The one that they tore down just to build a
Right.
new
oh
one.
god, they
The thing is
ripped
like
it
less.
down.
The thing's like less than, or it was like less than 5 years old, and they completely tore it to the ground just to build a new one with a different
yes.
orientation.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Probably had a few more gas pumps.
yeah.
Yeah.
Drive
Yeah.
through and different
Yeah.
layout.
All those things.
They might have added some electrical. We're seeing some electric EV chargers.
Some of the bigger
Yeah.
corporations actually do have rules about all that, and they will try to be sustainable. So I guess looking at the whole profession, I wouldn't change a thing in terms of the education. It was the best education I could have ever had. It was incredible. Being in an education where you can be creative and learn about drawing out the essence of something and understand what questions to ask and how to reframe and look at something from all different perspectives, like literal, cultural perspective,
Yeah.
social, history,
Yeah.
environmental, all these perspectives. And then to understand how to weave something back together that's meaningful for people to use. Like when you make something, it's usually because someone needs something.
Usually.
Usually, sometimes it's not. But so that, fulfilling people's needs for having a more productive space to work in, or being able to be more comfortable in a space, or giving people who have challenges with hearing, giving them more a quiet or space, or just all the different kinds of owners I've worked with. There are tons of different requests. And I think that part of the profession's always been very intriguing. And sometimes I think about leaving the profession and I'm like, well, I really do still like the design. The hard part is what this meeting that you came, this topic of coordination. The hard part is how to manage coordination where it's, I'm going to use one of my yoga things, kind and compassionate and
Yeah.
coming from a place of caring intentions, coming from a place of, good heartedness. And that gets lost in the construction practice
Yeah.
very quickly because it's so driven by schedule and budget.
Yeah.
The
all the
politics,
influences.
like the politics of it all, is a completely different skill set. You know,
Yes.
like you could sit
Yes.
chambered off doing design and do wonderful design, but
Yeah.
being able to manage the politics of people and the budget and the schedule is something that really it's a separate skill, and it could be a full-time job if you let it.
It is full-time jobs. A lot of owners hire reps, construction reps. One of my good friends does that for several owners around Richmond. And I mean, I just think her job is the most stressful job in the whole wide world.
The center of it, because your job in that world is to basically deal with fires. So there's never a call you receive that's not on fire, I would guess. You know, that's why I always feel bad for the architects and the general contractors, because I would guess, find yourself in the middle of everything, whether or not your scope says that you should or shouldn't. There's this weird pressure to do something about it. It's like, okay, sure.
So one of the things that I realize is how I manage my time is I go into my office trying to do the best job that I can do with what's before me.
Yeah.
Whatever comes my way that day, I just don't know what it is going to be. Like I'll have a plan for what I want it to be.
Yeah.
And I'll try to stick to that plan. And sometimes, I have to take care of a lot of different things that I didn't think about, but I try to do it with joy.
Yeah, that's good. That's
Right?
a great approach.
Because it's not going to do
Yeah.
anything to be mad about it or frustrated about it.
Yep.
And what I found that gets a little contagious.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
if you approach that with the other people with the kindness that you're wanting to spread, you can somehow manage some of that what I call the conflicts of the negativity. So
Yeah.
I am starting to learn, and I am actively taking classes in communication and actively taking classes in all sorts of mindfulness to try to spread that type of communication and coordination.
So you talked before we were rolling. You were
I
talking
know.
about breathing, and can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, so I would guess this is part of getting yourself into this good mental state, or
Yeah.
dealing with stress as it arises. So how does that play into your daily life when you in your practice? This breathing, you're talking about the fire breathing, and then just generally taking deep breaths.
Taking deep breaths, balancing your central nervous system. And there's so many great podcasts on the
We can turn this one into.
neurobiology. I mean, we really have, one of the ones that I listened to described that in the last 5 years, we've learned 90% more than we ever knew about the brain.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe
In the past 5 years.
in the past 5 years,
Wow.
she was an MIT professor.
Mm-hmm.
So we've just learned so many more things about the compartmentalization of where all the actual things are happening in your brain. So they know
Okay.
the locations now of where different things. And they used to just say, oh, visuals in this little area, audio's over here, language is over here. But now they're knowing where sentence structure versus noun, pronoun, things like that. They're
How do
getting.
they figure that out?
I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I
Like, how
watch
deep have you been in this podcast? you know?
every now and then when I get a really a set of drawings that I am just doing some design work on or something, I'll put a podcast. Usually I can't listen to music or do anything on my computer except for doing what the work is. But every now
Yeah.
and then I will. And if I do have an opportunity, whenever I'm doing something that's like just doing a spreadsheet or something, I'll listen to something like that. And what I'm hopeful for, because you started off asking me, what has the progress been? And the progress has been me wanting to leave architecture on many occasions because it's so, I think people don't realize how much I will be thinking about that design. It consumes my whole life. I sleep, I wake up thinking about it. I dream about it. I'll wake up and go, oh, that's how I figure it out. It's consuming because you're trying to work through a variety of things, and I'm sure y'all do too.
Yeah.
And you almost can't put it aside. It's one of the, and I told that to someone, and they said, oh, that's all professions, and maybe it is. And so we just all have to find a way to balance that. And so one of the things that I have actively tried to do is work on balancing so that when a contractor does have a problem or an owner does have a problem, I can try to bring humanity back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It slips away real quick.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And I think that in our world we see the need for that. We see the need for taking a breath, taking a pause, and kind of relaxing into, oh, well, let's see, how are we going to solve that?
Yeah.
Rather than going to that place of blame, criticism, judgment. And because those things aren't going to do anything good. So this is nothing new. I mean, all relationships are, those things don't help. When you blame someone, it doesn't help. It's not going to help the situation. When you criticize someone, it's not going to help the situation. No one's going to improve from that. So I guess one of the opportunities that I have in my small little office here in Ashland, Virginia, is to show people that care of education, volunteer that kind of education, and help them to try to understand. But I do see from our conversation a couple other things I need to do.
Like what?
The kickoff meeting has to be mandatory.
Yeah.
The final delivery of the drawings has to be mandatory. I'm just not going to do it anymore. It's just going to be part of it. And I might not get those jobs because the budget might not allow for those, even though it's only 2 meetings. These budgets are so tight.
Yeah.
Yeah. The kickoff is so we realized it's so important. And, the contractor, I had one say, well, we don't need the MVP at the meeting because, we'll just ask RFI if there's an issue. And I say, that is the issue. We shouldn't wait for that RFI.
Yes.
Let me help you read the drawings by stating what I know to be my major assumptions that are usually missed or ignored because it's seen as boilerplate. And I'm like, this spec here is really important. I really need you to put that camera in the ground and not start cutting the slab up because I don't know exactly what's underneath there. So please don't skip that.
Yeah.
Make sure the invert is deep enough. And we've had that happen. I always tell people once or twice a year, there's a plumber that says he did it per the drawings. And he just starts cutting slab exactly where he drew a line.
I know.
And misses the investigation step where we're like, put a camera down there, make sure it's connected to the sewer and deep enough and in that location.
Right.
We had one project where it was connected to where we said connected to. They didn't put the camera, we specified. And turns out that thing doesn't connect to the sewer anymore. It was one of the abandoned pipes.
Oh, right.
But the engineer, we can't figure that out. When we do a survey, it's 1 hour or so on site, generally understanding the conditions and making sweeping assumptions, and on our drawing saying, hey, go do these things first before you start. Because we don't have a $30,000 camera to keep with us on every single site. And if we did, I sure as heck would charge $4,000 to use it.
Or X-ray vision.
Yeah. But I like them back
Well,
then.
and RFIs are a pain. They take 5 times longer for everybody.
Yeah.
Yep.
Than just doing the work up front.
I always say, let the nerds talk to the nerds. That's the fastest way to get a solution. The engineer nerd and the mechanical nerd and the rep. That's another one that we need to be better at Permisip, is bringing a rep sooner, because they know so much about that equipment.
I know.
They can save you from making major mistakes. And maybe you're doing a curtain wall or something too. There's just these things that whoever has the product are going to be able to tell you that you could read their cut sheets all day long. It's going to be nothing compared to the person who's worked for 10 years and seen every mistake they know.
I will always call the reps first.
The reps,
I call the reps all the
I don't know
time.
why it took me this long to figure that out. I'm like, dude, we just did a concept. I was like, send that off to, Jeff.
Well, because there's so many different products people want to use, and I don't know. I can't know all of them, so I do call the reps and ask this first, and they'll look. They're so good. They look at drawings. They'll send me the drawings. They'll come by. They're really such a great part of the education process. Really.
Yeah.
I guess I've always avoided it because I felt it was like a sales relationship, and I felt
Right.
weird about
Yes.
it. But now I realize that, especially going to this conference at Ashland, every manufacturer was there. I mean, there's 70 or 80,000 engineers, and and people. I keep putting my hand in front of your camera and your
It's
face.
okay.
Sit on it. Just sit on your right hand.
For tie my hand. But yeah, so I just learned so much about what they know in doing podcasting with them and asking them questions. I'm like, man, wow, what a big blind spot for me as a mechanical engineer. How did I not know how much I could lean on their expertise, just like
Right.
the contractors?
Well, I know you have something else to ask. The other thing is commissioning, which the commissioning agents are incredibly brilliant because they also start to know all the different equipment that goes together well, doesn't go together well. There have been meetings I've had at the community colleges and at that they just have a complete control system that that doesn't talk to the system that they have, and they have spent tons of money on this thing. And if they'd just gotten the rep or if someone had looked at what manufacturer was trying to be controlling which product, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. That's like your one wire story. You spend all this money on a 2-stage unit.
Yeah, my house. Yeah, I had a 2-stage air handler installed. It's an old historic house. There's no heating or cooling downstairs. So when we installed it, I got a 2-stage unit to deal with the peak season, but allow it to be 65% of the year. You don't need the second stage. Right. It just needs to run less energy. And so it was Airbnb, so we would peak up and handle it. But only because I'm an engineer do I know this, that the second stage wasn't wired. And it's like a $50 wire, but they just terminated the standard thermostat, and that second stage never got connected. So I went, I was excited. I was like, oh, let me check my second stage, try to get it kicked on, and it didn't turn on. So anybody else, that's the $17,000 worth of HVAC that somebody could have just completely never, ever known. Most people would never know, just simply never know that it wasn't wired. And it just got me thinking about the same thing. Commissioning is, in the energy code, it's actually mandatory. It's code required, but nobody does it. I mean, they're commissioning the envelope as well and making sure
Right.
all of that's been installed and all of the economizer for the HVAC works and all that. We've actually borrowed some language from the ICC code of commissioning on our drawings to just
Cover
it's code
that.
required anyway.
Well, it's important.
Mm-hmm.
It's saving our planet doing things like that.
Making sure it's actually done because it's rarely done. I mean, whether it's on purpose or not, the contractor that did that at my house, I know them. They're a great contractor. It was not on purpose. It was just, they just wired it up, it turned on, and they walked away. You normally put a 2-stage unit in a house.
Exactly. So it was something different.
Yeah. But the mindfulness stuff is what I wanted to kind of go back to because this is unique to this conversation. The meditate. I was going to ask you meditate on a regular basis.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Every morning.
It's in the morning, yes, now, but I used to in the evening, but now it's switched. So
Do you meditate? Have you ever?
I have. Probably only the handful of times I can count that I really got into it. It's really crazy. Like, you have to purposely take yourself back. They say, like, if you get distracted, to purposely say, like, it's okay and take yourself back from it. But you can really get really, really relaxed doing it. I mean,
yeah.
And the mental clarity
crazy.
once you wake back up from it, so what's your process? How do you get yourself into that meditative state?
Oh, yoga.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay.
So you do yoga first and then you meditate. Oh, for me, then
Wow.
I meditate. But that, sometimes I will just sit and meditate, because it'll be a good time to do that or something. And there's lots of different ways of getting into that calm state. Breathing, just being conscious of your breath. And there are mantras you can keep there's some online where you can do like learn meditation.
Oh, Phil's here. Oh, hey, Phil. Let me bring him in. I didn't even notice you. Sorry. That was that noise earlier. Hey, Phil. Can you hear us?
That was a while ago.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear him?
Uh-huh.
He's on camera here.
I've been here a few minutes listening in.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I
talking
came in
mindfulness.
when Melissa was talking about bringing humanity back into it. I thought that was
Well, I mean,
such a good. Yeah, I think that's why we get along with Melissa so well, because that's kind of what we're really trying to work on right now is remembering that everybody's a human. And sometimes I think all of us can feel like that is an obstacle in itself, is that all these people are humans. It can be so frustrating, but also the obstacle is the way. So, we just have to remember that we have bad moments too. We'd want a little bit of grace. Everybody that we're dealing with throughout the day has come into it with a completely different context of their day and their life, what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just like bringing us back to the humanity, I think is such a beautiful way of thinking about it. And good thing to remember, mantra, like you said.
And if you leave that for somebody else to do it, 9 times out of maybe 7 times out of 10, you're going to be disappointed. Like, there are some clients like you or whoever else that will call and it's never really like a blaming type of tone. It's like an understanding tone, like, hey, this thing, can we check on this? And some will call and say, what's wrong with this? So
Yeah.
It's kind of on you to have that approach of not assuming malice. We've been trying to do that and say this person is stressed or frustrated right now, but let me try to take them back down to earth so we can have a normal conversation as people.
or do no harm.
Yeah, I like that.
'Cause we were talking about before the podcast. Don't assume malice.
Yeah.
And do no harm.
Yeah.
It's like I said, it's a complicated. It gets very complicated very quickly. I had a professor in grad school, LeMessurier, who was a structural engineer, and he was doing the City Bank in New York, and he was at the Cape, and he realized he'd forgotten a bracket. Like, he forgot a bracing condition.
Mm-hmm.
He just sat there and he was like, and there was a hurricane coming, of course, just to make it a little dramatic. And he immediately took care of it. And I think that's part of it is just you have humility to just know you've made a mistake and just immediately take care of it and not fret about it too. It's just knowing that we are human, we make mistakes too, and accepting that and doing something about it. And I think that's why I come to my desk every day, just with that open mindfulness of saying, well, whatever comes, I will recognize it. I'm not going to push it over here.
Yeah.
I just banged your camera.
That's okay.
I'm not going to push it over here. I'm going to I'm going to address it. And so that also helps, just addressing things as they come. And it's not always easy. Sometimes, like, I take a trip to the chocolate jar, like, often during the day, you know, I'm just like, okay, I just need a little chocolate to get through this next thing.
Yeah.
But my children can tell you about that.
We used to get so worked up over those things happening too, and we've kind of reframed it as this is an opportunity to build trust with somebody.
There you go.
Strengthen a relationship, walk somebody off a ledge, you know, because it's so easy if somebody comes in hot just to come right back at it. And then now you guys are in a pissing match. Versus if you could just take 5 seconds of mindfulness to say this person's frustrated or whatever, or maybe I did mess up, right? But how can we reach a solution and calm somebody down? It's just a way better way to go about it.
Yeah.
Do you know Amrit from Fulton Singh?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's really good at that. He's got a
yeah,
gift
the
for
best.
de-escalation, essentially, and he's always be able to. He has his calming voice. You know, I'm trying to get him, but he doesn't want to do the podcast.
Oh, you should definitely get
I know,
him to
he'd be
do
great.
the.
Tell them to come on. Tell them it's not that bad. We're trying to convince them.
But yeah, that's a great way to think of it. Mindfulness, meditation. I used to meditate. I need to get back into that habit. I used to meditate in the mornings just to clear my head before anything started. You know, just sit.
Yeah.
So in the martial arts, I do taekwondo and we do jiu-jitsu together, Carter and I. And so when I was a kid and got my black belt in taekwondo, it was meditate every time we went. So I learned it as a kid. I didn't even think anything of it. It was just what we do, sit down. And what they told us to do is just imagine a pebble dropped in a water and try to imagine it getting to a complete calm state and attempting. And every time you kind of lost traction, just try another pebble. And then meanwhile, just breathe and just imagine that. And that as a kid helped. My son does taekwondo with me, and he meditates now when he gets stressed, or, you know, when he gets out of want, I'll just see him sit down.
Yeah.
Start breathing. It's ultimately the most practical stress reliever that I've ever found that's natural, just taking a deep breath.
It's in our body. Our bodies came perfectly made for dealing with everything, right? We just have to remember and access. It's funny that you say that about the pebble, because my yoga instructor has a meditation thing that she does sometimes where she talks about when the water's murky, it's when the waves on the water, when the water's clear, you can see to the bottom. It's like, you know, it's so peaceful. And then when there are waves, or when there's anger or frustration, or you could associate that with any kind of emotion, you can't see anymore. It's cloudy. It's hard to see. It's hard to react. It's hard to be. So that's a good one. It's just the pebble, seeing the pebble in the lake.
Yeah. In the pond.
In the pond, and letting it calm down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
But it's
Wes, Phil, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that a lot of our industry is very reactionary to things, and so that water is always getting, rustled up again and murky again because of how reactionary everybody is.
Everybody tries to they put their hands in the pond and grab something from it, you know, without thinking, and letting things settle down and have clarity of mind. That's a good one. I'm glad we hit that on this conversation, because we always talk about conflict and coordination and how to deal with it. What are your strategies for conflict resolution? And to start with yourself and take a deep breath and get to yourself to that mental state that you described.
right.
That's a great first step.
It is.
You know, and everything else from there just follows. You know, follow your intuition at that point.
Right.
Yeah, it's the best place to be. You know.
Phil, do you meditate?
I do from time to time, but not regularly. But when I do, I find it really, really difficult to meditate, even though I'm not like a hyperactive type person. My brain is kind of hyperactive. It's just always running all the time. And so it really takes a lot for me to actually slow down. People look at me, I seem like I'm slowed down all the way, but I'm really not.
There's
That's
a lot
funny.
going on in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I do, it really clarifies things. Like if you've been on autopilot and just kind of dealing with life over and over, it really helps to clarify. It's like you can step back and look at each individual piece and understand why you are affected the way you are by a given circumstance in your life, or to understand what is it that I actually want out of this. What is it that I'm just experiencing just because it's happening to me? And what do I actually want out of this, out of life, out of this job, out of this, interaction with this person, et cetera, whatever. It's just like, if you don't do that, you'll be lost in that flow. You'll just be carried away forever until you finally stop and try to say, I want to orient myself where I am right now, and then figure out from there, where do I want to be, or do I just accept where I am? Yeah, needless to say, I probably should do it more often.
Sound like you got it
That
going
sounds
on,
like I
Phil.
get
That
a
was
lot
pretty
I
from
know.
good.
Sounds like you're just meditating right before this.
Yeah.
Well, the person that I do the communication class, his name's Oren Sofer, and he's one of the things that I've really taken away from him is what matters. What is it that really matters? When you're in a situation, what's going to matter is that I am being kind to you all and being respectful to you all's knowledge that I don't have. I don't have the knowledge that you all have, that you give my projects. And we do it so fast. Like, can you get this to me? When you're,
Submittal, please. They're about to walk off site.
I need this. But in the end, it's that respect that I have for that you all. That what matters in the situation is when we do have a conflict, is letting you all know that I'm there. I'm going to be there for you. I'm not pointing. I'm going to point a finger. I'm behind you. We're going to figure this out. And even when we come and meet a client and say, deal with whatever the issue is, the existing condition that we didn't know about, and that now is a big problem because now we have to manage that. I mean, what matters is that we're all going to be doing that without that kind of negativity and conflict. So your original question was, what did the profession show me that over the years, and how have I reacted as an architect, or how have I found architecture as my profession? And the biggest problem for me in my profession was, I was nervous. I would be nervous at meetings. I'd be like, I wouldn't be able to be in my body. I'd be scared. I would be, since I've been practicing on my own, that went away.
Oh, really?
And you know why that went away?
Why?
Because I was the only one that I had to manage in terms of being the person who had to handle the situation. I didn't have to worry about what you were saying earlier, like like with y'all as a team, y'all have to
Internal.
You have to have this internal dialogue, and you have to relate with your people in India and your people in and it's different than. So that has helped me. Like, it really did help me to go on my own, to build that confidence.
Yeah, because there's nobody. So do you mean in the way that, Phil always says the buck stops here, so it's you and you only, or do you mean that there's less complexity of the inner politics of the organization you have to stress about, or both?
Kind of both.
Yeah,
Yeah, kind of both. Is that I feel like I haven't, where I used to, I used to see all of that it was a daily stress. It was a kind of a stress because it was expected of me to manage all these projects with not enough time, not enough money. You know, it was all that. And I guess now I manage that.
When did you start?
It was 10 years ago.
10 years? Okay.
Yeah, it's been exactly 10 years.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
this in 2 months.
Oh, wow. Happy almost 10 year.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's like the expectations given to you from the organization you were at before, and like trying to manage those. Right now, you're just managing your own expectations,
Exactly.
which is, I'm sure, a giant relief.
Yeah.
And also, you know, necessity being the mother of invention. I'm sure you don't have to deal with other people's standards and what they expect when they're not the ones actually doing that work. So they don't understand anymore what those standards mean and what that looks like for your day to day. So to be able to just make it up for yourself, I'm sure it was also a huge change to not have to. You can make up your own process at that point. You can do it however you want instead of having to be burdened by somebody else's process who made it up, you know, without your input at some other point.
Jason, do you know Jason Hopkins? Design physics. He's an architect we work with sometimes, but yeah, he's a solo practitioner, and I envy often the fact that he doesn't have to worry about the stress of the internal team. Somebody's upset about this or frustrated or didn't know this or that, and you could just, I mean, there's enough to worry about with one single project and coordinating.
Yeah.
And it's just a lot to keep up with, but we've done a good job. Last year we told a lot of our engineers to please either start engineering or leave, and so a lot of people left, and it was great. It was a smaller team, but the ones that stayed are extremely talented engineers, so capable of engineering in ways that I've only dreamt we could have a team to do, and 2/3 less of the team, but we're working less hours. And it's just way better, you know.
Wow.
And the company revenues haven't really changed. It's just been great. So you can imagine that many of the people leaving and having us be better. It just shows how an organization's internal stress can just get to become wasteful very quickly.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful movement in your firm.
Oh yeah, it's been great. I mean, it's been a wild ride of the past year, but we've stabilized, and that's part of what this is too. We're inspired to talk to some of the mistakes we've made with clients along the way, just talking through the industry and rebuilding trust. And I guess, you know, we call it never assume malice. You approach it with, you know, cause no harm or getting yourself to this mindfulness state. These things all come down to ways to enable trust between everybody. Stuart Evans calls it trust hurdles. You know, you have to constantly get over these trust hurdles throughout the project, so that you can be on the same page and it doesn't become this, you know, it's their fault. It's their fault. I did it for the drawings. You failed my spec. You know, that battle that happens. And so for those reasons, we like design build. And if it's not design build, it's design bid, we go into we like design assist, a GC being there on behalf of the constructability. I mean, I didn't even think about it until you mentioned it. The obligations of an architect are just like, the code is huge. To be responsible for the code is a massive responsibility by itself. And then you're also dealing with elements of architecture that are not code related, but, you know, way the space works, the way it looks, the way it expresses the user. And I don't even know.
I mean, just the envelope. I have a consultant architect, Studio 27 in DC. And if I have something that I am not familiar with, I call John Burke and his team, and we work on more complicated projects together because I can't do it.
Yeah.
I have to have another architect who has a team of people, but that also, you know, changes the whole dynamic. I'm more of a marketing project manager at that point. I'm more of a on-site, like making sure that the information gets between the people. So I don't do that all the time, but just the amount of information that you have to know to do the buildings. That's why architecture firms are large typically.
Yeah.
They're large. They have a lot of staff. There's a lot of knowledge base. They have different departments, different people have different expertise. And when I went on my own, it changed the kinds of projects that I can do. But it didn't change the integrity of those projects. And it didn't change the fact that I can build trust and I can build relationships. That's all the same.
Yeah.
So
That's the trust and relationship is the art. And as engineers, we're not necessarily known for like social skills or, charisma. And so it's challenging to bring a team up that can consult and make people feel that they can trust us, even if we're the nerd in the room. Okay, we can hear your needs. How do you explain it? I mean, shoot, it's tough. We are challenged as engineers, as a community, with the art of consulting. I like that you talk about classes, communication classes. We should start doing that with engineers.
Yep.
The person had come to Richmond and did a class, and I liked it so much that he was offering another class this summer, and I took 6 weeks of his class, and then I was like, oh, well, I'm doing the year-long class. And
Is it so you go there? Is it
no,
online?
it's online.
Okay.
But I did see him in person one time, but he is in California and he does the classes online. And
Okay.
he is an incredibly experienced communicator, and it blows my mind. Like, I watch him, and we have practice buddies too. So we practice what we're learning. So it's not just, there's a forum, there's a lot of activity that you try to keep up with. I mean, it's a time investment for sure. But it's sort of changing. It's reducing stress. I saw it right away.
Really?
Because I just saw the way that we hold what we think we're responsible for. As the architect, I always felt like I was responsible for like everything, and I felt that stress. And I'm starting to realize that I'm not responsible for everything. I can let go of some of that. I can just be listening to people, be more mindful of what people are asking me to do, rather than just taking the set. And like we were saying, I always take the set and I look at it. I really look at it. I try to make sure that I've caught everything. I take that step.
Yeah.
But I think the communication class is helping me, maybe personally too, just to like relax.
Yeah.
check
And
that
it could
out.
also be that I'm finally an empty nester and the 3 college tuitions are done. And,
Oh man, that must feel great. Yeah.
yeah.
We communication class. You'll have to share that with me after, because I'd be curious. We've been looking into something like that for us, for our engineers in general, like teaching. There's so much of your career that's highly technical, but if you don't know how to communicate with somebody, then it's just locked inside of one person and it can't come out. And how do you hear somebody's needs in the project? How do you consult with them early on about warning signs and not just sort of be passive aggressive and just wait till it becomes a problem and be proactive? Well, that requires being willing to communicate, which is not a comfortable thing for engineers. We'd rather just stay inside our little computers doing load calcs and then tell you what you need. But it's not that easy, It's hard. We've been lucky to have great communicating engineers here, but it's hard to scale and find more, especially licensed professionals. That's really difficult.
Yeah.
You so before we got to wrap up. It's already been an hour, I told you, but I do have one last question. I want to explore its conflict. And you're an architect. You've internalized this feel responsible for everything. It seems, but at the end of the day, you have a contract with services that are limited. But then people probably come to you indefinitely asking for more on a project. How do you draw boundaries? How do you set a boundary in that environment as an architect?
That's a great question. It's hard because my time is, no one is watching my time. It doesn't matter whether I spend 16 hours a day or 10 hours a day or 8 hours a day. No one's looking at my profitability or my billable hours.
Yeah.
So I have struggled with that because the first 5 years I was like, well, I've got to make this work no matter what, right?
Been there.
Right?
Yeah.
New job, you do whatever you have to do.
Yeah. We can all relate to that.
But then you can't. So I try to, educate people up front. The very first contract, the very first, and I'll educate them about y'all's fees too. And I'll say, this could be an extra, and I'll put it in the contract. I have like extra things in the contract that if you're going to need me to do this, and this, I've been getting more and more detailed about that. And I'm very detailed in what I describe I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And then if it's not in there, and I don't mind billing people. If they've used my hours, I send them a bill.
Yeah.
And if they want to talk to me about the bill, if they feel that I haven't done that, I am more than willing to show them what I've done. I had a client ask me for all my hours one time, and they were pro bono hours. And I went back and looked at my hours. And so it was kind of confusing to me that they asked for my pro bono hours.
Wow.
And I went back and looked, and I'd given them way more hours than I thought I had,
Yeah.
right? And then I was like, wait a second, look at all these hours I gave you.
Yeah.
But I wanted to. It was a project that I believed in, and I wanted to do that. But I just, so I'm careful with my contract. I'm careful with describing in my first meeting when I'm talking to people what I can and can't do, what the hurdles are, I educate a lot. Well, you're going to get into the situation where you're going to have wanted to have an interior designer because you're going to want to have all these things coordinated. And if you ask me to do that up front, it's going to cost me X. And if you ask me to do that 3 months into the project, it's going to cost me double that because I'm going to have to catch up and I'm going to have to work overtime. And so I do try to explain to people what exactly needs to happen. I'm very careful about scope of work. I'm very clear about, well, this is what you're going to need to be successful. And I'll say things like that. Like, if you want a successful project, you need me to look at the budget. You need me to look at review, X, Y, and Z or whatever. So I do educate a lot at that before we've even signed. And that has really helped.
Is okay. Yeah.
I'm not avoiding the difficult discussion.
Yeah.
Because I have to have that.
Yeah.
My time has to be somewhat preserved. Now, I do agree that I've spent more time on projects than what I actually say. I know that I do.
Yeah.
Because they become my little, I'm a shepherd.
Sometimes also I'll get into something for a project and I'll just have to stop billing because I find myself in a rabbit hole of studying some refrigeration.
I know,
or something.
exactly.
I'm like, okay, all right.
Yeah, some of it's continuing education, some of it's marketing, and those are very valid. And it's sort of one of the ways that I look at it is I know I'm going to spend a certain amount of time at work every day. And if it's all working out over the course of a year in terms of income and time spent, no, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
And tracking it, I track it. So it's been tracking fine, in terms of my amount of work that I put in. But I do work on jobs when it's not something that I was contracted to do, and I give those hours.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that?
I think it happens. Yeah. It's a tough one.
It happens to all of us.
Yeah.
And so I will sometimes, more recently, I've put ranges of fees. Like it could be as low as this, but it could be as high as this, because I don't know what I'm going to get into. And I definitely phase all of my fees. I do a first phase, second phase, third phase of what we're getting into, so we have a good idea of what the schematic is, concept, feasibility.
You don't even know how big the building will be.
I don't even know how difficult the floor plan is going to be. I know nothing. So I have a very outlined and specific contract.
When you say phase, you mean, we'll get through to this level here, but that's as far as I can price it right now.
Exactly. And I'll put
end.
estimates for the others and I'll base it on other projects and say, well, based on my other projects of this size and type, this is what you can expect.
So you'll have because I would guess something like this you do adaptive reuse only, you mentioned. So let's say somebody says, I have this 20,000 square foot office. You go through some schematic thinking and then suddenly that becomes 30,000 square feet office. So if you had priced, if you had priced it on 20, now it's like the change, it's easier just to stop and say, all right, you can go somewhere else if you want to take the schematic to another architect, but at least you were paid to get them to that level. We're not exposed to that. We're usually have the schematic stuff done, or some people like to have hourly with us during schematics so that they understand how big a room might need to be to prepare. But otherwise, we're really not exposed to I can't even imagine how difficult it is to try to put together a floor plan that large because of all of the potential options and how many do you have to give for somebody.
Yeah, I know.
And then they want you to redo it and redo it and redo it.
Yeah. Well, so the thing that architecture, when you talked about your whole life of architecture, there is so much studying that has gone on, so much research, so much going to buildings.
Mm-hmm.
So much of architects' time is spent, and I'm doing a little less of that now because I want to go enjoy my life a little bit, because I spent years studying, years and years reading and learning and looking and measuring and calculating, and at some point that is a lot of, those options. Now I can push those options out very quickly because I've got the 30 years of experience that helps with that. It doesn't even faze me anymore.
Like you said, you can't shortcut that experience.
That part doesn't even faze me. I understand from what people are saying right off the bat because I listened and write down what they're saying and then just turn that into their, but that's because these are small projects. Larger projects require much more.
You mentioned VMFA. I would imagine that was one heck of a ride trying to, I don't even know. I can only guess. It's a nonprofit, right? VMFA?
Yeah.
Is it? And so you have a board of directors that have that level of the bureaucracy. Then you have maybe some curators or the end users or whoever's part of that, and then a floor plan. And they're maybe not the most experienced user, but they do have an extremely, I'm guessing, a high level of taste and desires of how things.
Yeah,
the
they're all aesthetes.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was like, "What's the word?" That's exactly it.
I don't know if it's a word or not, but we use it around here.
You have to meet that as well, and then you have the board of directors that maybe have all these varying opinions. Whose is the one to follow? And man,
and the donor.
Yeah, and the donor. Yeah, so there's that influence. Like the people that pay for it, they're like, "I want to see it go in this direction. No, I want that to be over here." You're like, "Oh my gosh, I got a mechanical engineer now that." It's gonna change order me if you put this over here.
It's sort of a weaving, it's definitely a weaving.
Yeah.
It's definitely. I remember one of my professors talking about the constellations, and my brain actually works in a constellation pattern. I'm not in a line. I don't do linear thinking at all. That's why it's very difficult for me to sometimes to focus on all that linear, what could be helpful for me and streamline my process. I'm out here, being a designer and thinking about all these, but it's kind of a weaving of all those different things that come together when you're working with a group like that. And, it all kind of comes back to that coordination. If you can track it, if you can record it, if you're honest about it, if you build trust, if you get all the people that you can possibly get to help you with it, the reps and the contractor and the subcontractors and all of that. What we're kind of skirting around during this whole conversation is, and pulling together through this whole conversation is that it's just this. It's a recipe that hasn't been made yet. So we don't have anything to go by. So we create the recipe for every project, every time. And,
literally.
Literally. And literally. Yeah. And we don't know how much water to add, and we don't know how much salt, and we don't even know the herb because we can't see it.
Yeah.
And so it's just, maybe that's how we need to talk about it so that people understand how complex it is. What I think people don't understand is a lot of the principals of firms have never put working drawings together, believe it or not. They're all principals because they're really good at people.
People, yeah.
And so
People
they,
spools.
so they don't put drawings together. So you'd always get, you know, they didn't know how much time it took to put a drawing together.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, this whole idea of educating our clients.
Yeah, we've had a few people talk about especially the architects. Justin mentioned it, Jacob mentioned it. The role that they have in educating, also the role they have in early, basically helping somebody find a spot in the first place, which kind of gets underappreciated. I think the fact that you know, and it may not come together.
Yeah.
You don't know if they have the funding or the financing or if the deal's going to work, and then it's like, okay, cool. Glad I saw those 5 different leasing spots, but the educating part is a repeated motif, which I'm glad we're doing this. This podcast is also about that. It's just letting people hear what the perspective. There's so many people in the construction industry, fabricators, the reps, the architects, the engineers, the designers, the owner, the lender, the educator at, you know, Harvard. What are they teaching people now? You know, what is UVA or what is tech teaching people about the industry? Is it in line with what's going on today?
Well,
I'd love to chat with them.
That was a huge learning curve because what you learn in school is not what is out there.
Oh, yeah.
And there are some architects that get very frustrated by what's actually being done, what they learned in school about the possibilities, and then when they actually go to an art office, it can be very, very difficult.
The possibilities aren't always profitable.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this is I could, if we had a glass of wine, we'd be here for another 2 hours. Melissa, thank you for having us.
Can't believe it was an hour already.
Hour and 20 minutes.
Oh gosh.
Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for having us at your house. This is beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you.
We'll see you in the engineering world on the real drawings.
Every day.